Hi, these are the most interesting historical photos that I could find. Let's go! In 1983, a rock singer and a comedian rehearsed a wild wrestling scene for the Broadway play Teaneck Tansy. The strangest fact is that the show opened and closed on the very same day, turning this photo into a tiny piece of theater history. In 1964, an actor filmed one of cinema's most unreal final moments while sitting on a giant prop for Dr. Strangelove. The scene became famous because it turned a dark Cold War idea into a strange, unforgettable image that still feels shocking today. This 1956 hospital bill shows a room charge of $18 a day, with some medicine listed at only $1.75. The final total was $234.31, a number that looks almost unreal next to modern hospital costs. In 1954, this diner sign offered a uranium burger for 45 cents, showing how the atomic age even reached everyday food ads. The name was not really about the meal, but about a strange time when anything linked to the future could make people stop and look. On January 20th, 1990, people in Baku gathered around a ruined car after Soviet troops entered the city overnight. This photo became a stark trace of Black January, a turning point that pushed Azerbaijan's independence movement into history. In March 1954, a Hollywood star was photographed at the Beverly Hills Hotel after being named the most popular actress of 1953 by Photoplay magazine. On May 1, 1945, German soldiers crossed a damaged Elbe River bridge to reach American lines. They chose American custody over Soviet capture in the final days of World War II. On May 2, 1992, a Bosnian militiaman watched a Sarajevo street during clashes with the Yugoslav Federal Army. This was less than 1 month after the siege of Sarajevo began. Dora Gutterman was born in England in 1903 and moved to the United States when she was 2. In the 1930s, she earned $300 a week in sideshows, then later invested in property. In the 1950s, phone booth stuffing became a campus fad where students tried to fit as many people as possible into one booth. The goal was to break the local record and get featured in newspapers or magazines. On November 11, 1918, people filled the streets of Antwerp after the armistice was announced. The photo shows the city celebrating the end of the First World War just hours after the news arrived. In October 1961, children in West Berlin built a small pretend Berlin Wall out of loose bricks. The real wall had been raised only 2 months earlier, so even their play copied the news around them. In 1941, this United States train car was arranged for transporting dogs in separate passenger seats. A uniformed attendant stayed inside to manage the leashes and keep the dogs apart. In 1918, this airship frame lay near Meissen, France, after a failed wartime flight. During the First World War, 84 airships were built, and about 60 were lost to damage or accidents. In 1891, loggers in California stood on the huge stump of a giant sequoia nicknamed Mark Twain. The tree was so wide that more than 40 men could fit on its base for this photo. In 1967, an Iranian girl was photographed weaving a carpet by hand at a vertical loom. Each knot had to be tied one by one, so traditional Persian carpets could take months or even years to finish. In 1912, this Grand Prix race ran through public roads near Dieppe, France. Cars from makers like Peugeot and Fiat reached average speeds of about 100 kilometers per hour. In 1910, the Seine rose so high that parts of Paris turned into canals. People used boats in flooded streets near the Eiffel Tower, while homes, stations, and metro tunnels filled with water. At the Nuremberg trials in 1945, German leaders were forced to watch footage from the camps their own regime had created. One of them covered his face in court while the evidence was shown. Before 1942, many American students raised their arm like this while saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Congress changed the gesture because it looked too similar to the one used in wartime Germany. On February 5, 1918, soldiers in Veneto aimed an early anti-aircraft weapon at planes overhead. It was fixed beside a tree, showing how improvised air defense still was in World War I. This tiny wooden coffin from 1875 was made for a miner's canary named Little Joe. Miners used canaries as underground warning animals, and this one was honored almost like a co-worker. In May 1937, leaders of Japan's Socialist Mass Party celebrated after doubling their seats in a general election. It was a rare public victory for Japan's left-wing politics before the Second World War. In 1941, Norway collected 538,000 radio receivers by order during the occupation. Most were sent to Germany, cutting off a key way people could hear outside news. Two models in fur outfits pose on a black Lada at the 1973 New York Auto Show. The car was part of the Soviet brand's first major display in the United States, drawing curious crowds. A civil defense trainee in 1939 Baku wears a full gas mask and protective suit while holding a rifle near oil derricks. The drills simulated chemical warfare attacks to protect Soviet oil production, critical for military supply. The Hyatt Regency Kansas City lobby shows total destruction after the July 17, 1981 walkway collapse. Two suspended walkways failed above a crowded event, killing 114 and injuring over 200, sparking stricter U.S. structural engineering standards. Soviet workers in the 1980s practiced chemical attack procedures, wearing full gas masks in a civil defense class. A portrait of Lenin hangs on the wall as instructors guide them through emergency drills. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt studies a massive globe in 1942, a gift from the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA. The globe highlights global theaters of World War II during critical strategic planning. The Soviet Buran space shuttle sits on its launch pad in the 1980s, ready for its unmanned orbital flight. It was the USSR's response to the U.S. Space Shuttle program, capable of re-entering and landing like a plane. President John F. Kennedy inspects an AR-15 rifle, while Major General Clifton holds a CIA-developed crossbow in the Oval Office, 1963. The meeting showcased early Cold War-era weapons evaluation for potential military and covert operations. Swiss writer Anne-Marie Schwarzenbach stands on a Tennessee riverbank in 1936 as a small ferry carries two cars across the water. She traveled the United States with Barbara Hamilton Wright, documenting landscapes and daily life for her writings. On the 1931 set of Public Enemy, James Cagney stands as director William Wellman, and crew prepare a scene with live rounds. Los Angeles County Sheriff Clem Peoples, acting as technical advisor, mans the Thompson submachine gun for authenticity. Dock workers in Norfolk, Virginia, weigh massive bales of cotton around 1905. The scene shows the city's role as a major port and transport hub in the early 20th century. Walter Williams, the world's oldest man in 1959, lies in bed smoking a cigar while family and friends gather outside his window. The photograph captures his longevity at age 114 and the celebration of his remarkable life. Workers load ice blocks from a Denver ice and cold storage truck into a Pacific Fruit Express railcar in the 1920s. The scene shows early refrigerated transport critical for preserving perishable goods across long distances. A Soviet soldier raises the red flag over Berlin's Reichstag on May 2, 1945, signaling the fall of Nazi Germany. The image became an iconic symbol of Soviet victory in World War II, captured by Yevgeny Khalday. German Major Josef Gangl smiles for a photo on May 4, 1945, just one day before he was killed defending French prisoners alongside U.S. troops. His actions marked a rare case of a Wehrmacht officer actively resisting SS forces at the end of World War II. This photo was taken just months after the liberation of Paris, when wine and bread were still heavily rationed. Carrying 6 bottles of wine at once was almost illegal, showing her boldness and the desperate ingenuity of Parisians in post-war scarcity. The young woman handing flowers to the 1922 squadristi was participating in Italy's early fascist pageantry, a tactic designed to win popular support through spectacle. This 1937 photo shows a boy in North Dakota drawing water from a milk can. But many don't know that during the Dust Bowl, families often reused dairy cans for all liquids because clean water was scarce. Children like him handled dangerous chores daily. Before landing in North Africa, Patton personally inspected weapons on his craft, ensuring readiness. His hands-on check boosted troop confidence, but put him at frontline risk. After Cherbourg fell in June 1944, U.S. troops captured hundreds of German soldiers, many of whom had just endured days of intense fighting and artillery bombardment. Disarming prisoners like this helped secure the port, a vital supply point for the Allied advance into France. This scorched Italian aircraft was destroyed during the 1940 Allied counteroffensive in Italian East Africa, part of a campaign often overlooked in World War II histories. Its loss crippled Italian air support in the region, helping the Allies secure strategic Ethiopian and Eritrean territories. This weekly World War II ration shows just 3 ounces of bacon and a single egg, yet many adults survived on it for months. The extreme limits forced people to invent substitutes and stretch every ounce, reshaping cooking and eating habits across entire nations. When Muhammad Ali refused the Vietnam draft in 1967, he risked not only his heavyweight title, but also imprisonment and public backlash in a deeply divided America. His statement, "I ain't got no quarrel with those Viet Cong," made him a symbol of both athletic defiance. In 1936, Krakow, a Polish priest blesses newly produced 46mm Granatnik WZ-36 grenade launchers, a rare ritual linking faith and military preparation. These weapons would later see action against the German invasion. After intense urban combat in Seoul during 1950, a U.S. Marine collapsed from exhaustion, highlighting the brutal pace of the Korean War's early battles. Local civilians watched in stunned silence, witnessing firsthand the human cost of the conflict's rapid advances. During the 1942 Dieppe raid, a German medic treated a severely wounded British soldier, a rare moment of battlefield care amid a disastrous assault. The image was later repurposed for propaganda, emphasizing supposed German humanity despite the raid's massive Allied casualties. The 1974 Exxon building in New York, photographed by Ezra Stoller, was one of the first skyscrapers designed entirely around energy efficiency and modernist minimalism. Its uniform facade and plaza layout influenced a generation of corporate architecture worldwide. In 1873, Detroit Carbon Works amassed thousands of bison bones to produce animal charcoal, a key ingredient in early industrial glue, sugar refining, and fertilizer. Each bone represented part of a once massive bison population. This bullet-riddled Polish flag flew over Warsaw in 1944's final days of the uprising, symbolizing resistance even as the city was almost completely destroyed. Few realized that such flags were often smuggled between buildings under fire. On May 3, 1971, U.S. Marines landed on the National Mall to break up anti-Vietnam War protests, a rare use of military force on domestic soil. Many protesters later reported feeling intimidated by helicopters and combat-trained troops. In July 1963, Wrocław doctors wore full protective gear during a smallpox outbreak, one of the last major outbreaks in Europe. Their suits and goggles were early examples of modern biohazard protocols, long before standardized hazmat regulations. This rare photo shows a Soviet rail platform armed with a 45mm M1932 anti-tank gun and a quadruple M4 Maxim AA mount. The 45 could penetrate any early German tank, while the M4's dense fire made it deadly against enemy aircraft. Soviet technicians replace a T-34 tank's gearbox in the field, a task requiring extreme skill under constant threat. Every repaired tank meant saved crews and another chance to strike the enemy on the Eastern Front. On April 5, 1942, Belarusian partisans secured the Oktyabrski district, one of the first areas completely freed from German occupation. This zone remained under partisan control for over 2 years, serving as a base for sabotage and resistance long before Soviet forces returned. On March 30, 1945, Soviet soldiers marched past a burning house in Kirchschlag, Austria, once home to a Nazi camp commandant. Photographer Yevgeny Kalday later wrote that he and the soldiers personally set the fire as a symbolic act of justice in the final weeks of the war. In November 1941, residents of blockaded Leningrad queued for firewood near Kazan Cathedral, relying on small rations to survive extreme winter cold. Each bundle represented life or death warmth as the city faced starvation and temperatures below freezing. In this World War II scene, women prepare care packages for soldiers that included canned food, wine, champagne, and dirigible chocolate. Such parcels were highly prized at the front, often boosting morale more than rations from military supplies. After a Soviet airstrike on Kalchalts, a village on the Balga Peninsula, German vehicles and equipment lie destroyed. The attack exemplified the Red Air Force's strategy of targeting isolated outposts to weaken German supply and mobility in 1944 to 1945. Sergeant Richard B. Fitzgibbon, Jr., the first official U.S. casualty of the Vietnam War, was killed not by enemy fire, but by a fellow American soldier. His killer, drunk and angered by a prior reprimand, accidentally fell to his death while fleeing the scene. In 1988, James Brown was arrested after storming a Savannah insurance seminar with a shotgun over a dispute about his private restroom. He then led police on a 2-state, high-speed chase, driving 6 miles on shredded tires after his wheels were shot out. In 1940, during the East African Campaign, British forces captured an Italian fort, taking local Ascari soldiers as prisoners. These troops had been serving under Italian command, highlighting the multinational nature of colonial armies in Africa. In 1939, representatives of Mussolini's PNF paraded at the Foro Italico, a sports complex built to glorify fascist Italy. Participation in these ceremonies was politically compulsory, blending sport, propaganda, and loyalty displays for regime members. On May 3, 1943, Wing Commander Howard Cowboy Blatchford, Canada's first World War II air ace, was killed in action. This 1940 photo shows him with his 257 Squadron Hurricane Mark I, months after claiming his historic first victory for Canada. In 1975, Idi Amin and Muammar Gaddafi reviewed a military parade together, showcasing the rare alliance between two of Africa's most notorious dictators. Both leaders used such displays to project power domestically and intimidate neighboring states. On May 3, 1937, the LZ-129 Hindenburg made its final flight over Lakehurst, New Jersey, moments before the infamous disaster. The airship's dramatic crash would end the era of passenger Zeppelins and reshape public confidence in air travel. In 1989, a 20-year-old Will Smith was booked in a mugshot following an assault charge in Pennsylvania, years before his rise to global fame. The photo captures a rare glimpse of the actor's youth before his breakthrough in music and television. In 1959, an African-American student sits alone during lunch after being one of the first to integrate a previously all-white high school. The image captures the isolation and courage faced by students challenging segregation in the U.S. In 1863, Queen Victoria unexpectedly inserted herself into her son's wedding portrait, dressed in full mourning for Prince Albert and staring at his bust. Her presence overshadowed the couple, showing her deep grief. This 1896 Balmoral photo shows the British royal family hosting the Russian Emperor Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra. The meeting was part of intricate European dynastic diplomacy, months before Nicholas's coronation. This car hop from the Clock Drive-In, circa 1955, reflects the rise of American drive-in culture post-World War II, where waitresses on roller skates delivered meals directly to cars, shaping a uniquely mobile dining experience that defined mid-century youth culture. On September 11, 1953, Alal Ben Abdallah attempted to assassinate Sultan Mohammed Ben Arafa during a public prayer procession in Morocco. His act was motivated by nationalist anger at French interference and the deposition of Sultan Mohammed V. Castle Itter, May 5, 1945. French prisoners, U.S. soldiers, and German troops fought together against SS forces, one of World War II's only battles with Americans and Germans side by side. South Vietnamese Marines raised the flag over the citadel during the 1972 Easter Offensive, losing roughly 150 men per day to hold it for nearly 3 months. Ingush Highlanders, North Caucasus, early 20th century, wearing chokha coats, papaka hats, cartridge loops, and traditional belts. This clothing was practical for mountain travel and also showed a man's region, status, and local identity. This wooden device is preserved at Tuol Sleng Museum in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, inside the former Khmer Rouge site known as S-21. In the 1970s, S-21 held thousands of prisoners, and today its rooms remain almost unchanged as historical evidence. The Hindenburg left Frankfurt in 1936 in this image, 1 year before its final Atlantic flight. Its last voyage in May 1937 carried 97 passengers and crew to Lakehurst, New Jersey. A Soviet GAZ-21 Volga carries a giant A9-car radio display during a 1950s public parade. The GAZ-21 appeared in the mid-1950s and became one of the USSR's most recognizable passenger cars. London in 1940 faced months of wartime air raids, yet buses, prams, and street traffic still moved through damaged neighborhoods. The city's civil defense teams cleared roads quickly, so work, transport, and daily routines could continue. Bin Akao, leader of the Greater Japan Patriotic Party, speaks in June 1952 beside large Japanese political slogans. His name was later tied to the Asanuma case in 1960 and the Shimanaka case in 1961. Hugh's citadel was left heavily damaged after the 1968 Tet Offensive, one of the Vietnam War's most important urban battles. The old imperial city had walls, gates, and temples from the Nguyen dynasty. Beijing workers ride in a packed truck with banners during the June 1989 protests. Workers joined the movement alongside students, and some organized independent labor groups in the city. Bass Reeves was born enslaved in 1838 and later became one of the first black deputy United States Marshals west of the Mississippi. He served for more than 30 years and was credited with over 3,000 arrests across the American West. Austro-Hungarian prisoners stand after being captured near Monte Grappa in June 1918. The battle area helped block the Austro-Hungarian advance after the Second Battle of the Piave River. A Soviet Su-85 self-propelled vehicle crosses water during the Dnieper campaign in autumn 1943. The Su-85 carried an 85mm gun and was built to challenge heavily armored German vehicles. A Red Army soldier inspects a captured German Pak 35/36 37mm anti-tank piece with ammunition crates beside it. Soviet units first recorded using captured weapons of this type in July 1941, only weeks after the invasion began. Chita Evacuation Hospital. Number 479 treated Soviet soldiers during the Great Patriotic War. Several evacuation hospitals worked in Chita, helping thousands recover and return to daily life or service. Red Army handler Ivan Krivonosov works with his service dog Volchok on the 3rd Belarusian Front. Special dog units helped engineers locate hidden field hazards before troops and vehicles moved forward. Brothers Alexander Danilovich Dotsenko and Vasily Danilovich Dotsenko were photographed together in 1959 after serving in the Great Patriotic War. Alexander became a full holder of the Order of Glory, and Vasily received the title Hero of the Soviet Union. A Soviet partisan is pictured with a Danish-designed Madsen light machine gun, an uncommon model for Soviet fighters. Partisan units often used whatever equipment they could obtain, including older foreign models and captured supplies. In February 1942, Soviet Maxim crewman Porfiry Lipshev and Alexander Martinov operated from the medieval Cembalo fortress in Balaclava. The position linked a 14th-century Genoese stronghold with the Sevastopol defense line. The Jim twins were identical brothers separated after birth, adopted by different families, and both named James. They reunited at age 39 after both married women named Linda, later married women named Betty, and named a son, James Allen. Downtown San Francisco, 1969. Women held up bras during a public demonstration against strict beauty standards and dress rules. The action belonged to the late 1960s women's movement, which pushed for equal pay, workplace rights, and social freedom. 3 Busby Berkeley dancers wear fur-stage costumes in a 1933 promotional image for 42nd Street. The film became a major early Hollywood musical and helped define the giant synchronized dance number style of the 1930s. Students at Augustana College react to the O.J. Simpson not guilty verdict on October 3, 1995. The televised trial lasted more than 8 months and became one of the most watched court cases in United States history. Italian Alpini troops marched toward the Don River in summer 1942 during the Eastern Campaign. Built for mountain terrain, they were sent across open steppe, far from the Alps they were trained for. Ethiopian resistance fighters stand near damaged Italian military equipment during the occupation of Ethiopia around 1940. Italy invaded Ethiopia in 1935, but armed local resistance continued for years across the country. Ethiopian partisans gather in captured Italian uniforms during the Allied campaign in Ethiopia in 1941. Their local resistance helped end fascist Italian control and restore Emperor Haile Selassie to Addis Ababa. A Polish flag was raised over the Reichstag on May 2, 1945, as Berlin fell to Allied forces. Polish troops fought in the final Berlin operation alongside the Red Army, including units of the 1st Polish Army. Douglas S.B.D. Dauntless aircraft lined the deck of escort carrier USS Santee during Operation Torch in November 1942. The North Africa landings became the first major United States Army operation against Axis forces in the Western Theater. A frontline soldier rests in a hammock inside a damaged building, with boots, packs, and field gear scattered below. Hammocks were useful in rough positions because they kept troops off dirty floors and could be tied up almost anywhere. A Ugandan ruler is carried on a makeshift throne by 4 British businessmen in Kampala, 1975. The chair bears Uganda's national shield, while an umbrella is held above him like a royal symbol. Larry Burroughs captured Marine Gunnery Sergeant Jeremiah Purdy, reaching toward a fellow Marine south of the demilitarized zone in October 1966. The image became one of the best-known Vietnam War photographs because it recorded battlefield aid during a real operation. Orthodox Christians carry crosses and icons past Lenin portraits in Soviet Russia, 1990. Late Soviet reforms had allowed public religious processions to return after decades of strict state atheism. Romanian leader Nicolae Ceausescu meets Kim Il-sung in North Korea on June 15, 1971. After this trip, Ceausescu launched the July Theses, bringing Romania closer to strict ideological control. Azerbaijani soldiers stand near a toppled Stalin statue in Fuzuli, 1992. The scene captures how Soviet symbols remained visible in the Caucasus even after the USSR had collapsed. Jane Fonda sits with a North Vietnamese military crew during her 1972 visit to Hanoi. The image became one of the most controversial celebrity moments of the Vietnam War after her public opposition to United States policy. Hideki Tojo speaks from his Tokyo home window on September 11, 1945, after Japan's surrender. American personnel came to arrest the former prime minister for his wartime leadership role. Indonesian leader Suharto does target practice with a cigar at his family ranch in 1994. He ruled Indonesia for 31 years after replacing Sukarno and resigned during the 1998 crisis. Idi Amin reviews a military parade in Uganda during the 1970s. He came to power in 1971 and ruled until 1979, with military display central to his public image. Rare footage of Taliban founder Mullah Omar is extremely limited because he avoided cameras for most of his public life. He was known for his unusual height, one missing eye, and years of hiding before his passing was confirmed in 2013. A Harvard-educated immigration lawyer and former United States Marine, became central to the real Gone Girl case in California. Police first treated the woman's story as fake, but the case later proved real and became Netflix's American Nightmare. Ota Benga was taken from Congo in 1904 and displayed at the St. Louis World's Fair as part of a racist human exhibition. In 1906, he was put on display at the Bronx Zoo, a case now remembered as one of America's most disturbing public exhibits. In November 1971, 5 teenagers and 1 student leader were trapped by a blizzard on Scotland's Cairngorm Plateau. The Cairngorm Plateau disaster remains Britain's worst mountaineering tragedy and changed school outdoor safety rules. A Romanian secret police lieutenant general defected to the United States in 1978, becoming one of the highest-ranking Eastern Bloc defectors. He later worked with American intelligence and wrote books exposing communist espionage and propaganda methods. A young job seeker stands outside an Italian-American employment agency in San Francisco during the Great Depression in 1936. The window signs offer farm jobs, showing how many people searched for any work during the economic collapse. Around 1850, a blind man was photographed with his young reader holding the New York Herald. Paid readers often helped blind clients access newspapers, letters, and public news before audio technology existed. Afghanistan's last king, Mohammad Zahir Shah, sits with his dog in 1960, 13 years before he was removed from power. He ruled for nearly 40 years and was remembered as unusually restrained, with no known political execution orders signed during his reign. Luna 3 returned the first images of the moon's far side in October 1959, revealing terrain humans had never seen from Earth. 50 years later, NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter mapped the same hidden side in sharp detail after launching in 2009. A Belgian Farman F-40 crew poses with a skull-painted aircraft nacelle during the First World War. The Farman F-40 entered service in 1915 and was used for reconnaissance, light bombing, and later pilot training. A young girl sits on a windowsill in Kentucky in 1964, during a decade of major attention to rural poverty in America. Images like this helped show living conditions that became central to President Johnson's war on poverty. The 56th Punjabi Rifles pose beside the Great Sphinx in Egypt during the First World War. Indian Army units served across the Middle East, guarding the Suez Canal and fighting far from their home provinces. On May 2, 1989, Hungarian border guards began removing the fence along the Austrian border. This quiet work became one of the first visible cracks in the Iron Curtain before the Berlin Wall fell later that year. A North Korean leader meets a visiting Soviet official during a delegation visit to North Korea in 1956. The meeting came before the Soviet official became the USSR's top leader, making it an early Cold War diplomatic record. Margaret Thatcher is photographed with British forces during the Falklands War era, the conflict that defined her premiership. On May 2, 1982, HMS Conqueror sank the General Belgrano, the only combat sinking ever made by a nuclear-powered submarine. A British royal rides on horseback in traditional tweed on May 3, 1976. The outfit combines countryside riding clothes with a naval-style beard from his military service years. In 1886, a future United States president served as a deputy sheriff in North Dakota and tracked 3 men accused of taking a riverboat. The episode became part of his frontier reputation years before he entered national politics and the White House. Near Épinay, France, in 1918, an injured British soldier and a German prisoner share a cigarette at a field medical station. Small moments like this were recorded even during the final months of the First World War. Canal boat captains gather at Coenties Slip in New York in 1898, a floating settlement for Erie Canal boatmen. Their boats could carry up to 250 tons, with families living in small cabins behind the cargo holds. 2 soldiers of the 1st/5th Northumberland Fusiliers paused near Toutencourt, September 1916, during the Battle of the Somme, illustrating the everyday fatigue and reliance on horses for transport in trench warfare. Mademoiselle Gabrielle was a Swiss sideshow performer, born without legs, renowned for her elegance and commanding presence. She dressed in high fashion, often enhancing her waistline with corsets and photo retouching, performed briefly in vaudeville. French prisoners and German soldiers stand together in a Verdun trench, circa 1916. The German unit in the back, likely the 1st or 2nd Guard Regiment, was active in the Verdun sector during the battle. Igor Sikorsky in 1912, piloting one of his first 4-engine aircraft, the Grand or Ilya Muromets, which were the world's earliest heavy bombers and passenger planes. Audrey Hepburn and Anthony Perkins aboard a plane in the UK, 1962, likely during travel for a film shoot or promotional tour. Children play basketball on a handmade court in Soviet Russia, 1957. The massive warship behind them looms silently, showing a stark contrast between childhood and military power. A boy sits on a giant tortoise eating watermelon at the Bronx Zoo, New York, 1925. The tortoise bites the same slice, showing a rare moment of shared curiosity and calm between human and animal. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and Consuelo met in France, 1930, just before his long flights across Africa and South America. Consuelo later became the real-life inspiration for the Rose in the Little Prince, a symbol of love mixed with conflict and creativity. Jean-Paul Belmondo plays pinball in a French bar, 1965, before becoming a star of the French New Wave cinema. He is photographed in casual clothes with a pipe, showing his early charm long before films like Breathless made him famous. Afghan farmers harvest wheat in the 1960s using traditional hand tools. Their turbans and robes show rural Afghan clothing, unchanged by mechanized farming at the time. Natalie Wood, 3-time Oscar nominee, poses for a U.S. Navy sailor in Cannes, 1962. She wears a fashionable hat and pearls, capturing Hollywood glamour on the Riviera during the height of her career. Welch, a coal mining town in West Virginia, photographed in September 1938. The small houses and industrial buildings reflect the harsh living conditions and dependence on the coal industry during the Great Depression. An Iowa farming family sits on a couch in 1906 with a cat, showing typical rural life in the early 20th century. The striped work clothes and simple home interior reflect daily life before widespread mechanization and modern conveniences. 2 monks operate one of Russia's first hydroelectric generators inside the Solovetsky Monastery, 1909. The plant used White Sea water flows to produce electricity, marking a rare combination of religious life and early industrial technology. Charles de Gaulle walks with his daughter Anne in the 1930s. Born with Down syndrome, she lived at home with her family until her death from pneumonia at age 20, defying the era's common practice of isolation. Annette Kellerman was arrested in 1907 for wearing a form-fitting swimsuit in Victoria, Australia. Her outfit challenged strict swimwear laws and sparked public debate about women's rights and body freedom. Earth appears as a faint blue dot in deep space, photographed by Voyager 1 in 1990. The image shows our planet as a tiny, fragile speck against the vast darkness, highlighting the scale of the cosmos. Kim Jong-il, future North Korean leader, meets performers in 1976. To his right is Ko Young-hwae, who would later become the mother of his son and successor, Kim Jong-un. A streetcar runs on the Burncoat Street line past the Worcester County Courthouse in Massachusetts, circa 1927 to 1928. This image shows early 20th century urban transit before buses largely replaced streetcars in American cities. Sheikh Mijwal al-Dulaimi, leader of the Arab Dulaim tribe, photographed in Ramadi, Iraq, 1909. His tribe was known for fierce resistance against British colonial forces, defending their territory and traditions. Michio Asanuma, far-right activist and relative of Inajiro Asanuma, speaks on a street platform at Shinjuku Station in the 1950s. He later publicly praised the assassin of his relative, reflecting extreme post-war political tensions in Japan. Ethiopian partisan leader Abebe Aragai addresses his fighters during the Allied liberation of Ethiopia, 1940 to 1941. His forces resisted Italian occupation in the East African Campaign, playing a key role in restoring Ethiopia's sovereignty. A massive crowd attends an election rally in Hanoi, January 1946, for the first legislative election of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. This was the first and last nationwide election until 1976, marking a key moment in Vietnam's early post-colonial political history. A parishioner collapses in grief on the altar steps during Jimmy Swaggart's sermon, February 1, 1988. Swaggart publicly confessed to sexual indiscretions, shocking his congregation and sparking a major televangelist scandal. Chuck Schumer Center appears on the TV quiz show It's Academic in 1966 with two classmates from James Madison High School, Brooklyn. Their team won the New York Finals but lost in the regional championship, marking an early public achievement for the future U.S. Senate Majority Leader. Anti-war protesters gather on the U.S. Capitol steps on May Day, 1971. Their actions over 3 days led to the largest mass detentions for civil disobedience in American history, directly challenging the Nixon administration. A Detroit Tigers fan poses beside an overturned, burning police car after the team won the 1984 World Series. Celebratory unrest in parts of Detroit turned violent, and images like this became widely circulated, defining the city's chaotic post-victory reputation. Mexican Army soldiers stand guard in Mexico City after the 7.8 magnitude earthquake, 1985. The stopped clock shows the exact moment the quake struck, while collapsed buildings and rubble highlight the disaster's massive destruction. Mykola Bokan stands over the grave of his 22-year-old son, Kostya, who died from malnutrition while working on a Ukrainian collective farm, 1933. This photo captures the human toll of the Holodomor, a man-made famine that killed millions in Soviet Ukraine. Times Square, New York City, in 1908, as skyscrapers began transforming the cityscape. Early high-rises and bustling streets show the city's rapid growth into a major commercial and cultural center. The final photograph of comedy legends Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, taken in 1956. This image captures the duo's signature playful humor shortly before their passing, closing an iconic chapter in early film comedy history. Manohar Aich, a pioneering Indian bodybuilder, poses with a trophy in 1952. Known as the Pocket Hercules, he lived to 104, passing away in 2016, and inspired generations in India's bodybuilding community. Smoke rises from the Trzebinia refinery in Poland after a U.S. Army Air Force's bombing mission during World War II. This operation, launched from Soviet Ukrainian bases, was one of the few missions targeting Polish industrial sites. Claire Brim, a former enslaved woman, poses outside her home in Texas on September 29, 1937. Her photograph preserves a direct connection to the generation that lived through American slavery. Children listen to their grandfather's stories about the American Civil War, 1930s. He holds a musket while toy soldiers and cannons are arranged on the floor, illustrating the battles for the young audience. A turkey and a cooking pot advertise a free Christmas dinner for the poor by Volunteers of America, Denver, 1905. The display on the street highlights early 20th century charitable efforts to feed those in need during the holidays. Charleston, South Carolina, after Sherman's March, 1865, showing widespread destruction. Union forces targeted the city in retaliation, as South Carolina was the first state to secede and ignite the Civil War. Workers lift the colossal statue's head during the relocation of Abu Simbel Temple, 1968. The massive move preserved the site from flooding caused by the creation of Lake Nasser after the Aswan High Dam construction. Hitler Youth launch a homemade glider in Trebon, Germany, January 1932. The youth-built aircraft was tested for short flights, emphasizing technical skill and controlled landings as part of pre-Nazi youth training programs. German soldiers from the Wehrmacht or Waffen-SS operate a captured Sherman tank, 1944. This Beutepanzer was scavenged and repurposed for German use after being seized from Allied forces. Princess Diana presents medals to Australian surf lifesavers, 1985. She became the first member of the British royal family to attend a public surf life-saving event, drawing international attention to the sport. United Airlines displays the average stewardess in 1950s America. The model's age, height, and weight reflect strict airline standards that shaped early commercial flight aesthetics and gender roles. A sailor lifts a full keg labeled "The Queen God Bless" aboard a Royal Navy ship, 1950s. This marks the traditional shipboard ceremony for christening or commissioning a vessel with ale or beer. A young boy crosses a London street on a pedestrian crosswalk while a police officer stops a red double-decker bus, 1950s. The boy pulls a toy along, illustrating everyday life and the iconic London street scene during the post-war era. Soldiers of the U.S. 9th Infantry Division engage enemy positions near the South Vietnam-Cambodia border, 1970. This action was part of cross-border operations targeting North Vietnamese sanctuaries during the Vietnam War's Cambodian campaign. Mel Brooks serves in a U.S. Army vehicle during the World War II, 1944. He participated in the European theater, later drawing on these experiences in his satirical films about Nazis and the war. Coffins of civilians killed in the American bombing of Prague are paraded during a state funeral, 1945. The attack, intended to strike German forces, caused significant civilian casualties, becoming one of the most controversial air raids in the city's history. Mercenaries of the 5th Commando Company prepare for combat against Congolese Simba rebels, 1964. They were part of international efforts to support the central government during the Congo crisis following independence from Belgium. The four-masted schooner G.A. Kohler lies beached at Salvo, North Carolina, 1934. 9 crew members were rescued during the August 1933 storm, and the ship was later burned for scrap iron during the World War II. Members of the Ku Klux Klan pose in 1871 during the Reconstruction era. This photograph captures the early Klan, which used terror and intimidation to oppose Reconstruction policies and suppress black civil rights in the post-Civil War South. U.S. tankers stand near their vehicles in La Glaise, Belgium, after the withdrawal of Kampfgruppe Peiper, late December 1944. This marks the closing phase of the Battle of the Bulge, one of World War II's largest and deadliest German offensives. Sophia Loren cowers in her car as fans surround her and smash the windshield. Rome-San Remo Rally, April 9, 1956. The incident reflects the intense public frenzy surrounding the Italian film star at the height of her early fame. A young woman trains with a homemade punching bag in the early 1900s. This image highlights the emergence of women's participation in physical fitness and boxing long before it became socially accepted. In 1994, France opened the Bamboula Village Human Zoo, displaying people in traditional African attire. The exhibit sparked controversy for reviving colonial-era racial stereotypes in a public attraction. Belfast schoolchildren in a Catholic neighborhood play with a British soldier on patrol, May 1981. The interaction highlights everyday life amid the Troubles, showing the proximity of armed forces to civilian areas. A mother leans through a basement window to read to her 6-year-old daughter, quarantined with polio. This photograph captures the personal sacrifices families made during polio outbreaks to maintain connection and care. In 1911, Wyoming State Penitentiary fielded a baseball team of death row inmates. Their executions were temporarily postponed as long as they continued winning games, blending sport with a grim form of mercy. A psychiatric patient stands in a straitjacket, mid-20th century. The image reflects historical practices in mental health care, where restraint devices were commonly used to control patients deemed violent or unmanageable. British soldiers crossed the Caen Canal on a Bren carrier, June 1944. The bridge was later renamed Pegasus Bridge to honor the airborne division whose winged horse emblem symbolized the capture during D-Day operations. Fishermen and beachgoers scramble as a massive wave approaches during the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. This moment captures the sudden, destructive force that claimed over 230,000 lives across multiple countries. In 1960, Catholic schoolgirls crafted delicate Christmas angel ornaments at their desks. Each figure was hand-cut and assembled, reflecting the era's focus on meticulous holiday crafts. Princess Diana, her bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, and driver Henry Paul are captured in this photo just moments before their fatal car crash in Paris, 1997. A vast tent camp fills the Jordan Valley, where Palestinian families lived after leaving their homes in 1948. Rows of canvas shelters stretch across the rocky hills, turning a remote valley into a crowded place of waiting and survival. A group later known as Nakam stands together after the Second World War, made up of Jewish survivors who believed ordinary justice was not enough. Their secret plan became one of the least-known stories of post-war Europe. A prison baseball team in 1910 posed with one strange rule behind their season. Every win gave the players more time. The team became a rare case where a sports record could change the fate of men already marked by the court. An American flying ace sits in his cockpit in the Philippines in 1945 with victory marks from all three Axis Air Forces painted below the canopy. One mark also refers to a friendly aircraft he forced down to save its crew, making this one of the strangest pilot records of the war. I would be very grateful if you subscribe to my channel. I try to share interesting historical photos like this every day.